Hey there everyone, Mychal Bryan here with another astrological question and answer segment where real astrologers bring me their questions and I provide them answers based on my astrological practice.
Yes, my question is about, if that's the right term, intercepted signs. I haven't found much, I guess, reading on it besides like, like if a sign's intercepted, there's a degree of hiddenness to it, but I'm more so interested, like, if there's anything beyond that, especially if we're factoring in, like, for instance, what if the luminaries are in an intercepted sign or a chart ruler, etc., etc.
Wonderful. Awesome. All right, so this question has to do with intercepted signs and what does it mean when we either have intercepted signs within our chart or if we have planets that are present in intercepted signs. Interception occurs when an entire sign is held within a house and it doesn't occur or it doesn't appear on the cusp of the house that came before or the cusp of the house that came after. That is what is known as interception in astrology. Now, traditionally speaking, we really only have one aphorism arising out of the Renaissance period regarding this topic of interception. And it has to do with the topic of a lost ship at sea. So, in the 17th century, there's an aphorism regarding interception that says if the significator of the ship is in an intercepted sign, meaning the sign that that planet is in isn't showing up on the house that came before it or the house that came after it, that can sometimes be an indication that that ship is stuck in the harbor and that that ship doesn't have the ability to leave the harbor that it is currently located in. So that is the primary interpretation of interception that we have coming out of the 17th century, but we really don't see anything beyond that as far as a qualitative interpretation in the same way as intercepted signs tend to be interpreted in modern astrology. Now, just to talk about modern astrology for a bit, in modern astrology, we know that the emphasis tends to be a lot more on interpreting the signs of the zodiac in general. And I have a lot of thoughts about this, but in general, as we look to older systems of astrology, we find more of an emphasis being placed on a planetary interpretation and less emphasis being placed on a zodiacal based interpretation. However, in modern astrology, many astrologers learn astrology first through understanding the signs of the zodiac, which I'm going to refrain from sharing my thoughts and opinions about that. But the reality is that when you create a system of astrology that focuses so much on interpreting what the signs of the zodiac mean, then of course, if I have signs of the zodiac that are intercepted and that don't appear on the cusp of the house that went before it or the house that came after it, then clearly I'm going to read something deeply into that. So, for example, in modern astrology, there's this thought that if a person has Leo intercepted within their chart, then they struggle a little bit more to manifest the aspects of them that are Leonian. And conversely, they will also struggle to manifest aspects of themselves that are Aquarian. Because if you have one sign of the zodiac not showing up on the cusp of the house that came before it or the house that came after it, the same thing is going to be true for the sign that is occupying the opposite side of the zodiac. So if I have Leo intercepted, I will also have Aquarius intercepted. If I have Aries intercepted, I will also have Libra intercepted, and so on throughout the zodiac. Now, this idea of interception, once again, we really only have that one aphorism that I shared with you earlier coming to us from the 17th century, and we don't really see interception being mentioned at all from the perspective of natal astrology. Whereas today in modern astrology, interception is a big topic within natal astrology because so much of modern astrology constellates itself around this very detailed interpretation of the signs of the zodiac, that if there is something happening to two signs of the zodiac, then we have to say something about it. I personally don't, me, in my house, don't necessarily agree with that because one, I don't really practice zodiac based astrology. I practice planet based astrology, which means I'm already not interpreting the signs of the zodiac, period. So it doesn't matter to me if you're a Leo, if you're a Scorpio, if you're a Taurus, if you're Ophiuchus. It really doesn't matter because in the grander scheme of how I practice astrology, which is more in harmony with how astrology was practiced in the 17th century and previously, our major dearth of interpretational information comes from the planets and the relationship that planets are having with each other. So, from that perspective, interception means literally nothing to me from a natal astrological perspective. Now, the question with interception oftentimes goes into, well, why does interception occur in the first place? If you're practicing astrology using any quadrant based house system, the higher or lower your location is in terms of latitude, geographical latitude, the funkier your houses are going to appear. Which is why when we have people who are born in Finland, for example, the charts are going to look very strange because you're going to have some houses that are very, very tiny, and you're going to have other houses that are humongous. And this is purely a result of the fact that most quadrant based house systems don't really have the ability to handle extreme heights or depths of geographical latitude. It's a problem with the house system. The issue then becomes when we want to interpret something into the fact that, oh, in this Finland chart, these 6 signs of the zodiac are intercepted. Sometimes you can cast a chart for somebody who lives in very high parts of Russia or in very high parts of Finland, and they have 6 signs of the zodiac intercepted. So what does that mean? Are you telling me that that person doesn't know how to manifest the Aries, the Libra, the Taurus, the Scorpio, and the Gemini, and the Sagittarius parts of their being? It really doesn't make sense. And I think that as astrologers, we need to practice an astrology or at least force ourselves to ask astrological questions within ourselves that can be universalized. And if your interception theory works well for you in New York City, you really can take that to Finland. Because in Finland, you're going to find yourself surrounded by a population of people who have 4 or 6 signs of the zodiac within their charts intercepted. Then what do you say? So, as for me and my house here at the Oraculos School of Astrology, we don't talk about interception, teach interception. We know what it is because it's something that happens within a quadrant-based house system, but we don't apply any interpretive value onto it. Similar to this concept of interception is the idea that the size of a house has some spiritual significance within the life of a person. This is also a little bit crazy because house sizes change, especially if you're using a quadrant-based house system. The sizes of your houses are going to change drastically if you live in a location or if you're born in a location that has a very high geographical latitude. So the reality is the fact that you have a tiny first house and a humongous sixth house doesn't mean that sickness is going to be a more prevalent topic within your life than health is, which is something that tends to get thrown around on Facebook in some of these rookie astrology forums. People say, oh, if you have a big first house and a small sixth house, that means you're not going to get sick in this lifetime. Or if you have a big eighth house and a small first house, then that means that death is going to be a major topic within your life. We don't practice astrology like that. I believe, as professional astrologers, we don't practice astrology like that. I would love to believe that these ideas are just ideas that exist within the minds of raw beginners who don't really know astrology. But the reality is, these concepts, such as the size of my houses being significant, or even the idea that having intercepted signs is qualitatively significant for the person who is having those intercepted signs within their chart, we just, and I'm trying to be mindful with my words, but there are other things within our chart from which we can derive far more interpretational value than interception as a concept. The reality is that within traditional astrology, when we are interpreting anything that occurs within a house, our first line of defense For example, if I'm interpreting my second house and what's going on in my second house of money, my first line of defense will be to interpret the planets that are physically present within that house. Because, in the words of Jean-Baptiste Morin de Villefranche, determination by location is immediate, which means that a planet in a house is going to impact that house in a major way. Whether or not there's an intercepted sign in that house or not, the planet in that house is going to impact that house in a major way. The second thing that we do in terms of interpreting what's going on within the life of a person as far as a house is concerned is we interpret the ruler of that house. The next thing that we can do is we can interpret the state of the ruler of that house, the essential dignities and abilities, the accidental fortitudes and abilities. Then we interpret the aspects that are occurring to the ruler of that house. When we apply all of these things to all 12 houses within our natal chart, we end up with a comprehensive natal astrological reading. And within that system of astrology, or within that approach to astrology, we find that we never have to talk about which sign is intercepted versus which sign isn't intercepted. We don't have to talk about the intercepted planets. We don't have to talk about the size of the houses. We don't have to talk about my north node means this is where I'm evolving. My south node means that's my past life. We don't have to talk about your Pluto. We don't have to talk about how many fire planets you have versus water planets versus air planets versus earth planets. We don't have to talk about the hemispheric emphasis. We don't have to talk about the fact that you have the finger of God in your chart. We don't have to talk about a lot of things because traditional astrology is a simple creature. Planets in the house have a direct impact on the house. The ruler of the house has a secondary impact on the house. And the aspects to the ruler of that house have a tertiary or a third impact on the affairs of that house. And if you apply that system of astrology from this day until the day that you die, you will practice extraordinary astrology. You could practice extraordinary astrology in other ways as well, but you could also practice extraordinary astrology just focusing on those three components: planets in the house, ruler of the house, aspects to the ruler of the house.
If I could add on top of that, like, so it's not even relevant. For example, again, looking at like what houses does the planet rule? If any of those, because it's by sign, I guess, if I'm thinking about this correctly. Even if the sign that planet rules is intercepted, you still don't doesn't matter. I guess if I'm asking that right. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. For example, I was giving a reading to somebody the other day who had Leo intercepted in her ninth house. And therefore, the sun couldn't be considered to be the ruler of any house because Leo was intercepted. Now, in traditional astrology, particularly within the astrology of 17th century astrologer Jean-Baptiste Morin, we do find Jean-Baptiste Morin speaking about the ruler of the intercepted sign being a co-ruler of that house. So this is something that we do find within his philosophy. However, at the end of his chapter where he speaks about co-rulership, he still doubles down, or he still double downs, whatever, however you say that. He still reinforces or reiterates the fact that at the end of the day, co-ruler or not, the planet that is more specifically entrusted with the destiny of a house is always going to be the specific ruler of that house. So it doesn't matter if you have a sign intercepted within your seventh house, for example. The fact of the matter is, if you have Libra on your seventh house cusp and Scorpio intercepted within that seventh house, even though in Jean-Baptiste Morin's philosophy, Mars is going to be the co-ruler of that seventh house, at the end of his own delineation, he's still going to say, regardless of what that Mars is doing, Venus is going to have a far greater impact in terms of determining the destiny of that person's love life, because Venus is the specific ruler of the sign on the seventh house cusp. So, At Oraculos, if I were to ever force myself to practice a version of astrology in which I incorporated interception, I would do so along the lines of Jean-Baptiste Morin's theory of the planet that is ruling that intercepted sign being a co-ruler of that house. However, for me, the most important thing is always corroboration. So if the ruler of the second house said that a person is going to experience poverty within this lifetime, and the planet that is the ruler of the intercepted sign in the second house says, no, this person is going to be fabulously rich, for me, because of the type of astrology I practice, which is a lot of blind chart readings, I would stake my career more so on the ruler of the second house than the intercepted sign ruler within that second house. However, if in a chart where, for example, I had a sign intercepted in the second house, say I have Taurus on my second house cusp and I have Gemini intercepted within my second house, and I had Mercury as the co-ruler of that second house because Gemini is intercepted within that second house. And if Venus said that the person was going to be poor, and if Mercury also said the person was going to be poor within this lifetime, both of those things for me would be a double corroboration that, alas, this chart declares poverty within this lifetime. Whereas if the Venus said this person is going to have massive wealth within this lifetime, and the Mercury says this person is going to have massive wealth within this lifetime, then I would use that as a double corroboration that, alas, this person is going to be wealthy within this lifetime. However, if the co-ruler is in conflict with what the primary ruler says, I will always stake my claims, I will always stake my career on what the primary ruler of that house is doing and not on what the co-ruler is doing. So even in that explanation, you can see how minimally I actually integrate this idea of co-rulership into my astrology. I really don't integrate it at all. But if I were to force myself to integrate it, it would be a secondary consideration that would never have the ability to overthrow the primary consideration based on the actual ruler of that house. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Totally.
You're very, very welcome. Thanks everyone for joining us once again for yet another astrological Q&A segment. If you want to be a part of the live recordings of these segments, make sure to check out our website at www.oraculosastrology.com to sign up today. And also, if you haven't already done so, please make sure to subscribe to the Oraculos podcast wherever you find us across the internet so that you can keep your finger on the pulse of all things concrete astrology.